Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely flip the script on what it actually took to become a legendary elite warrior in the ancient world. When we think of the ultimate fighters in history, our minds instantly jump to things like intense physical training, sweat, heavy armor, and just endless combat drills, right? But as we unpack the historical sources today, you're going to see that the physical side of things was literally just the tip of the iceberg. The real battlefield? Well, that was entirely in the mind.
Section 1. Beyond the Sword.
So we generally assume ancient military camps were all about, lifting heavy stones and swinging swords, basically just acquiring skills and perfecting a trade. But the ancient empires that conquered the known world, they understood something absolutely fundamental about human nature. Sure, a strong arm can be defeated by a stronger opponent, but an unbreakable mind? That will fight until the absolute bitter end. The secret wasn't just building a physically stronger weapon, it was about fundamentally rewiring the human holding it. Ancient military architects realized pretty quickly that you couldn't just grab an ordinary person, hand them a spear, and expect them to hold the line when thousands of enemies are charging right at them. No way. You had to strip away their old, ordinary civilian identity entirely and replace it with something completely uncompromising. Section 2. Total Identity Reconstruction. To really wrap our heads around how ancient empires forged their greatest fighters, we need to dig into the underlying science of behavioral and ethical conditioning. This wasn't just left to chance. This was a highly structured, incredibly deliberate science of human programming. We're talking about empires literally engineering a new breed of human from the ground up. Just let that idea sink in for a second. Completely rebuilding an individual. This means rewiring what they love, what they fear, what they value, and even how they perceive reality itself. They understood that real courage in the face of absolute terror doesn't come from your muscles. It comes from a deeply instilled ethical framework that values the group, the mission, or the code way above any individual instinct for self-preservation. The physical combat training, that merely gave them the tools. The behavioral conditioning ensured they would never, ever hesitate to use them.
Section 3. Persians, fear is slavery.
Now let's look at the Persian Empire. We are exploring one of the most formidable military machines in human history here. And at the absolute pinnacle of that machine was their elite king of Kingsguard. To guarantee absolute loyalty and just unmatched ferocity, the Persians put their recruits through an extreme, lifelong conditioning process. And I mean lifelong. This started almost the moment a future elite warrior took their first breath. Aristocrats who were destined for greatness were actually taken and raised entirely by eunuchs until the age of 7. Just think about the psychological impact of that for a minute. From birth through their most formative early years, they're kept in this highly controlled environment, totally isolated from standard family dynamics or the ordinary comforts of the outside world. Basically, they're a blank slate, perfectly prepped for the next phase. Then, right at age 7, they're handed over to incredibly strict mentors, and it's only after surviving this massive, systematic progression that they reach adulthood and finally serve in the elite guard. Under these mentors, they weren't just taught how to hold a shield or march in a straight line. No, they were philosophically programmed to believe that fear is slavery and that telling the truth is the absolute highest virtue. Now, this is fascinating, right? Why focus on telling the truth if you're trying to build a super soldier? Well, because lying is actually a symptom of fear. We lie to avoid consequences, to protect our egos, to hide our flaws. By conditioning these young warriors that telling the truth is the ultimate virtue, these mentors were systematically eradicating fear right out of their psychology. Think about it. If you don't fear the consequences, you don't lie. And if you don't feel fear, you absolutely cannot be enslaved by your enemy out on the battlefield. It's a real game changer. Section 4. The Aztec Great Speakers. Okay, let's shift gears and travel from ancient Persia all the way across the globe to a completely disconnected civilization in the Americas. Because here, we find a remarkably similar approach to human engineering. The Aztecs were fierce imperial conquerors, and their elite class, known as the Great Speakers, were at the absolute forefront of their military might. But rather than just going to a standard military boot camp, these Aztec nobles attended the Calmecac. This was a crucible completely dedicated to the intense mastery of discipline and religion. Notice what's prioritized there. It's not weapon mastery first, it's discipline and religion. These young nobles were pushed to their absolute physical and mental limits through fasting, sleep deprivation, and really intense instruction. The whole goal was to embed the empire's ethical code so deeply into their core identity that their physical actions on the battlefield were really just an extension of their spiritual devotion. Section 5. the science of discipline.
When we step back and look at the big picture, this fascinating scientific and psychological pattern really starts to pop out. It tells us that human biology and psychology share a universal code. You simply cannot force a human being to fight to the bitter end purely through the threat of punishment or, the promise of gold. It has to come from within. Whether it's the Persians focusing heavily on truth and courage, the Aztecs focusing on religion and discipline, or even the Japanese samurai utilizing incredibly strict behavioral codes, the absolute core focus was identical every single time. The names change, the armor changes, the geography is completely different, but the science of identity reconstruction, that is the universal denominator. They all hit the nail on the head. The ultimate weapon is the human mind, properly calibrated by an unshakable ethical code. So, what does this all mean for us today? The crucial takeaway is this. If ancient empires built their most unstoppable forces through total psychological and ethical reconstruction, if they truly believed that physical training was secondary to mastering the mind and the spirit, how does our modern understanding of elite discipline really measure up? Are we basically just training with our modern equivalent of swords, focusing purely on skills and technology? Or are we paying enough attention to the behavioral and the ethical conditioning that actually makes a human being unbreakable? It's a pretty profound question to leave you with, and it honestly challenges everything we think we know about true high performance.